It was supposed to be just a simple hiking trip, a chance for Ralston to explore the raw beauty of the Blue John Canyon in southern Utah. A quick getaway, just him, nature, and the open desert sky. But within hours, his adventure turned into a fight for survival he would never forget. April 26, 2003. Aaron was deep in the rugged canyon, navigating through narrow paths between towering cliffs, his mind on the thrill of the adventure. The air was dry, the sun relentless. It was peaceful. But the desert had a secret. It could go from serene to deadly in an instant. That instant came when Aaron made a simple misstep. Aaron was climbing over a large rock, just like he had done thousands of times before on his hikes. But something shifted. The boulder he was standing on gave way, and before he could react, it slammed down, pinning his right arm against the canyon wall. Stunned, he tried to move. He pulled. He shoved. He screamed, hoping anyone would hear, but there was no one. No one in sight. No one within miles. Aaron was alone. Stuck in the middle of nowhere. The rock that had trapped him was too heavy, and his arm was trapped beneath it with no way to move it. With each passing minute, the reality of his situation settled in. No cell phone signal. No food. No water. Just miles of desert stretching out in every direction. He could barely move. He was pinned in such a way that even the slightest movement caused sharp pain, and the rock seemed as if it would never budge. His thoughts turned to survival. He would have to act fast. But what could he do? The first few hours were filled with disbelief. Aaron tried to keep calm. His training, his experience as an outdoorsman, kicked in. Think. Plan. As the hours ticked by, Aaron began to feel the physical effects of his entrapment. The sun was unforgiving, beating down on him with no mercy. Heatstroke threatened to set in, dehydration took hold, and his trapped arm was becoming more swollen by the minute. He needed to escape. He tried everything. Pushing, yanking, digging with a small knife. But the rock was too heavy, and his strength was rapidly fading. His body was already running low on energy from the heat and lack of food. The reality set in. This wasn't going to be a quick fix. This wasn't a scenario where help would just show up. He was on his own. Night fell, and the desert became even more eerie. The temperature dropped sharply, but the sense of isolation was worse than the cold. Aaron realized he had no choice but to conserve his energy, so he tried to sleep, but the pain in his arm was unbearable. And his fear of what would happen next kept him awake. The reality was undeniable. His arm was in danger of being lost. By the second day, things had taken a turn for the worse. His water supply had already begun to dwindle, and the heat continued to intensify. He rationed his food carefully, just a few granola bars and a small amount of water. But even that wasn't enough. His arm was swelling rapidly, and the pain was becoming excruciating. He could feel the numbness creeping into his fingertips. Desperation began to creep in. Aaron realized the one thing he feared most. No one would find him in time. He was too far off the beaten path. No one knew where he was. His only hope was to free himself, to find a way out before his body completely failed him. The third day was when Aaron realized just how dire his situation had become. His arm, trapped beneath the rock, was now showing signs of severe injury. His fingers were turning a bluish color, his wrists swollen. The only thing keeping Aaron alive now was sheer willpower. But how much longer could he last? As the day wore on, Aaron's situation grew more critical. With no one around, and no way to move, his thoughts turned darker. He began to ask himself a chilling question. Would he die here, alone in this canyon? But survival had a funny way of pushing people to their limits. Aaron refused to give up. By the fourth day, Aaron knew that time was running out. His arm was no longer just injured. It was decaying, and he could feel the infection beginning to spread. He was growing weaker by the hour. The desert was beginning to take him. In a desperate move, Aaron made an unimaginable decision. The only way out, the only way he could possibly survive, was to amputate his own arm. He had no tools, no proper equipment, but he did have a small, dull pocket knife. Aaron could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on him. The pain was excruciating, but the desperation was stronger. With the knife trembling in his hand, he started the slow, agonizing process of cutting through his flesh and bone. It took over an hour. Each cut was a battle. Every moment felt like an eternity. The pain was unimaginable. His arm was being severed in the most brutal way possible, and the blood loss was immense. But Aaron didn't stop. He couldn't. He had one chance to survive, and this was it. Finally, after what seemed like a lifetime, Aaron cut through the last of the bone and freed himself. He was free, but not out of danger. He had to get out of the canyon. Aaron, now one-armed and bleeding, used every last bit of his energy to climb out of the canyon. The pain, the exhaustion, the blood loss, all of it made the last leg of his journey nearly impossible. But against all odds, Aaron made it. After miles of crawling and stumbling, he was finally spotted by a group of hikers who rushed to his aid. He had survived. Aaron was airlifted to safety, his life forever altered by the brutal decision he had made in the desert. He had survived. He kept telling himself he was going to be okay. The desert was harsh, but he had been through tough conditions before. But the real question lingered: how far would you go to survive? What would you be willing to sacrifice when every minute counts? Aaron Ralston survived the impossible, but his story raises an even darker question: how much of the human spirit can truly endure when survival is the only goal?